All right, let's shift our focus to the courts now, where the accused in the multi-million rand Nulane fraud trial are applying to be discharged. It comes as the state was not allowed to admit most of its documentary evidence. The accused, including Gupta associate Iqbal Sharma, say the NPA has failed to put forward a winnable case. eNCA's Moloko Moloto joins us now with the very latest. Good morning, Moloko. So it seems the state's inability to admit the documentary evidence is a very significant lose, which now the defense is going to use to have the charges against its clients dismissed.
Hello, Mfundo Mabalane. Well, the accused have just walked past me here. They are heading into the courtroom. We expect that the hearing will possibly commence at about 9:30. Important day today. Because the accused, some of them, I must indicate, have actually applied for Section 174 in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. Essentially, they want to be discharged because they believe that the state has not been able to successfully prove their guilt. But let's get some insight and coherent analysis from one person who's been sitting on this case, senior legal journalist from News 24. Her name is Karen Mon. You certainly know her. Karen, thank you so much for making time. A significant day today, I assume. The accused simply say the state has failed to link us to this particular crime.
Absolutely, and not just that, they're actually saying that the state has actually failed to prove that a crime has been committed, and that's specifically in relation to that Nulane contract, which is it's the state's case that there was a fraudulent contract that was awarded by the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in the Free State to Nulane to conduct that feasibility study for the Mohoma Mabung project, which at the time was championed by the then Premier Ace Magashule. The accused in this case saying, well, you haven't actually proved that a fraud has taken place. And you and I have sat in court as we've heard various holes being poked in some of the evidence that the state relied on to say that the deviation in procurement that was granted by the department was fraudulently granted, but major holes in the letter, for example, that was used to do that. There wasn't proper follow-up done. And of course, we saw a major blow for the state last week where the judge just decided that essentially, key documents were going to be ruled inadmissible because the state had not done enough to authenticate them and to show that they were originals. So the state very much on the back foot. This is the first state capture trial that the NPA is running, and for it to end in a Section 174 discharge will be a massive embarrassment for the NPA.
And I guess maybe let's talk about the implications. We know, Karen, that the Friede Dairy matter, which is also appearing in another court, I think in April, it will be up for pre-trial. It is closely linked to this particular transaction. In fact, we know that the Friede was established following the due diligence report by the Nulane transaction. What does it mean? What are the implications thereof? Because we know some of the people charged there include the former MEC Mosebenzi Zwane. Do you get a sense that perhaps it might negatively impact that particular case?
Well, obviously the Friede project was, it's the state's case in this matter that the Nulane or someone at Nulane, we haven't heard any evidence about who that person may have been. We've heard that it may have been a Gupta lieutenant, Ashok Narayan, but we don't have any certainty over that. Changed the feasibility study that was produced by Deloitte at a cost of 1.5 million in a subcontract from Nulane to favor Paris, which was a Gupta-linked dairy. So this case casts a long shadow. But I think more importantly, we have seen very embarrassing evidence about the state's failure to properly accumulate evidence, to speak to the accused, to get or nail down all aspects of the case. And if that pathology is repeated in this other case, in the Friede case, then we should be concerned. Of course, the other major thing is that this is the case that the state is seeking to extradite Atul and Rajesh Gupta from the UAE from. And according to authorities here, they have been sitting in detention for 9 months. And if there is an adverse impact against the Gupta accused in this case, Ronika Raghavan, Island Site, who are facing the same charges as Atul and Rajesh Gupta, it could be potentially devastating for that extradition effort, and they will make much of it. Of course, crucially in the papers that they've filed, Ronika Raghavan and Island Site saying that the state has fundamentally misrepresented the evidence that they had against them, and that people within in the NPA should be answerable for that.
Yeah. And Karen, as we conclude, we've had also contradictions, particularly by the state witnesses, senior people or key people who have been investigating this matter. But maybe let's simplify Section 174 for some of our viewers who may not be conversant with it. What does it mean if they were to be granted that, they were to be discharged? Does it mean they will never be charged for this?
They'll be acquitted because Section 174 discharges are granted in circumstances where a court believes that the state has failed to make a case that the accused should be required to answer. In other words, they don't even need to defend themselves because on the evidence that the state has produced, they are not implicated directly in criminality. So it would be a major blow for the state for such a discharge to be granted in this case.
Karen Mon, as always, thank you so much for your coherent analysis and insights there. Of course, the expectation is that, Mfundo, today there's going to be a hearing of that particular application, and I'm not too sure if we will expect any judgment with regard to that today, but certainly this is, getting some momentum after about 4, if not 5 weeks of the trial, the first state capture case to go on trial. And as you heard from Karen, it will certainly have some impact as to whether the fugitive Gupta brothers, whom we know have benefited in terms of the money that flew into the bank accounts of some of their companies, it's certainly going to be interesting to see whether the accused will likely be given that Section 174.